The first impact came without warning, a violent tremor that split the sky apart. From orbit, the Vorthan Dominion's warships hung like specters above Earth, their sleek black hulls devouring the sunlight as they descended. The world had barely begun to understand the magnitude of what was happening before entire cities were erased in a single wave of plasma fire. New York, Shanghai, Berlin, names that had once commanded history, reduced to ash within moments. The invasion was not a war. It was an extermination. From the Bridge of the Judgment, Supreme Commander Zalruin observed the spectacle with cold detachment. A creature of towering stature and obsidian-hued skin, his 6 eyes flickered with amusement as he watched the humans scramble like insects beneath his fleet shadow. He had anticipated resistance, the way all primitive species resisted before they were folded into subjugation, but this was not a battle. It was a lesson. They are slow to understand, he mused, glancing at his second-in-command, Viacor. They are an emotional species, Viacor replied, his mandibles twitching in what passed for a sneer. Hope is a difficult thing to kill. Zalruin exhaled, the low rumble of his species equivalent of laughter reverberating across the command deck. Then let us educate them. With a flick of his clawed hand, he gave the order. The next wave of bombardments ignited the Earth's surface like dry parchment. Far below, General Marcus Hale watched from the safety of an underground command bunker, his jaw clenched so tightly it could have been stone. The room around him was thick with the scent of sweat and static electricity, the air charged with desperation. Holographic displays flickered against the dim lighting, marking human forces in dwindling numbers. Hale's face, weathered by decades of military service, remained unreadable as another red marker vanished from the screen. The Chicago outpost was gone. Across the table, Dr. Evelyn Kessler adjusted her glasses, her fingers trembling as she ran a hand through her short, graying hair. "They're wiping us out," she said, voice tight. "Not just our cities, Marcus. Everything. Infrastructure, communications, any means of long-term survival. This isn't just conquest. They're making sure we never get up again." Hale's expression didn't change. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, weaving through scenarios, calculating outcomes. The invasion had been swift, their defenses laughably ineffective against the alien technology. But the Vorthan had made a single mistake. They had left survivors. He turned to his officers. Lieutenant Bishop, a wiry man with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, met his gaze with grim determination. Across from him, Sergeant Walker, built like a tank and twice as stubborn, cracked his knuckles impatiently. They were soldiers, fighters who had witnessed humanity's worst days and had yet to bow. "They think it's over," Hale said finally. "That's their first mistake." A beat of silence. Then Walker, ever the cynic, let out a short, humorless chuckle. "Great. And what's their second mistake?" Hale allowed himself the faintest ghost of a smile. "Underestimating what desperate humans are willing to do." The plan had been forming the moment the first cities fell. Conventional warfare had failed, that much was clear, but the Vorthan had been arrogant. They had relied too much on their technology, their sense of superiority, believing no species could rival their empire's might. They had never faced an enemy who thrived on adversity. Project Revenant had been an afterthought, a theoretical contingency designed in the darkest corners of human military intelligence. It was never meant to be used, because using it meant that humanity had already lost. And yet, here they were. Kessler pulled up the schematics, the glowing blueprints illuminating the table. "The virus is designed to infiltrate their neural interfaces," she explained. "Their ships, their weapons, even their communication systems. Everything is linked through a shared network. If we inject a self-replicating AI into their systems, we can turn their own infrastructure against them." Bishop let out a slow whistle. "So what? We hack their war machines, turn them into our own attack dogs." "Not exactly," Kessler admitted. "We introduce chaos. We won't gain full control, but we don't need to. We just have to make their systems unreliable. Glitches in targeting, failed shield responses, delayed commands. It won't win the war outright, but it'll give us the opening we need. Walker folded his arms. And how do we get this virus into their systems? They're not exactly handing out USB ports. Hale exhaled, tapping the side of the table. We give them something they can't resist. It was a suicide mission. A captured human vessel, rigged with a fake distress signal, designed to be taken into a Vorthan warship for examination. Inside, the virus would spread like wildfire. A Trojan horse wrapped in human desperation. It was a gamble, but one worth taking. Walker leaned back, shaking his head with a grin. So, we're about to convince an intergalactic empire that their unbreakable system can be taken down by a bunch of pissed-off primates with a glorified malware update. I love it. Bishop snorted. Yeah, nothing about this sounds like a bad idea. Kessler pinched the bridge of her nose. I swear, if we survive this, I'm finding new people to work with. Hale pushed away from the table. No time to waste. We move now. The bunker erupted into motion. Engineers prepped the ship, coders refined the virus, and soldiers checked their weapons with renewed purpose. Outside, the world was still burning, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was something more than despair hanging in the air. Hope. Hours later, Zhao Run sat comfortably within the bridge of the Judgment, watching the last of Earth's resistance flicker out. The humans had fought longer than most, but in the end, they had proven what he had always known. They were weak. A transmission flickered to life on his control panel. Supreme Commander, VA Corps announced, his voice tinged with curiosity. We've intercepted a human distress signal. A small craft, barely operational. They are requesting surrender. Zhao Run tilted his head, intrigued. Bring them aboard. Let us see what remains of their defiance. The trap had been set. The human vessel drifted toward the Judgment, its hull scarred and battered, barely holding together. Its distress beacon pulsed weakly, a beacon of surrender in the void. On board the Vorthan flagship, Supreme Commander Zhao Run watched with mild amusement as the ship was drawn into their hangar. The humans had finally broken. He had expected it to happen sooner, but sentimentality was their greatest flaw. They always fought past the point of reason, clinging to some foolish notion of survival long after logic dictated surrender. Now, they came to him, begging for mercy. He stood at the viewing window, arms folded behind his back, as the human craft was secured. Vorthan soldiers, clad in obsidian armor, raised their weapons as the ship's ramp lowered. The chamber was silent, every warrior poised for violence, expecting a final, desperate attack. Instead, the ship's lone occupant staggered forward, arms raised in surrender. He was a wreck of a man, face bloodied, uniform torn, one eye swollen shut. His breath came in ragged gasps, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse. General Marcus Hale, he rasped, commanding officer of Earth's last defense. Zhao Run took a measured step forward, studying him with detached curiosity. The name meant little. Hale had been a persistent thorn, one of the few who had managed to delay the inevitable. But in the grand scheme of conquest, he was insignificant. You come to surrender, Zhao Run said, his voice a deep, resonant hum. Hale swayed slightly, nodding. What's left of us? VA Corps, standing beside his commander, clicked his mandibles in disdain. Pathetic. You had the opportunity to die with honor in battle, yet you choose to grovel. Hale exhaled a slow breath, steadying himself. Honor. He let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, we had a long debate about that. Turns out, it's hard to have a philosophical discussion when your planet's on fire. Zhao Run's expression remained unreadable. And what do you seek? Mercy? No, Hale said. His good eye locked onto Zhao Run's. I seek an audience. The request was unexpected. Surrender was expected. Pleading was common. But this? Intriguing. Zhao Run studied the human, noting the exhaustion, but also something else, something simmering beneath the surface. He nodded once. Very well. The human was escorted from the hangar, flanked by armed guards. As they disappeared down the corridor, VA Corps turned to his commander. This is a waste of time, he hissed. We should execute him and be done with it. Zhao Run was silent for a moment, then turned, his voice thoughtful. Humans have an odd habit of making things complicated. I wish to understand why. The meeting chamber was stark and clinical, built for efficiency rather than comfort. Hale sat at the long metal table, hands bound, a single overhead light casting deep shadows across his face. Across from him, Zhao Run took his seat, his imposing frame nearly dwarfing the room itself. Hale exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. You know, for a species that considers itself superior, you sure as hell love your dramatics. Big rooms, deep shadows. Very evil overlord. Zhao Run blinked slowly. You jest even in captivity. Hale smirked. It's either that or cry. And I don't think you'd respect me much if I did the latter. A pause. Then, to Hale's surprise, the alien commander let out a low, rumbling chuckle. Perhaps not. Hale leaned forward slightly, his demeanor shifting. I need you to understand something about humans, he said. You see weakness. You see desperation. And you think that's all we are. You think survival is our only goal. He tilted his head. But survival is just the beginning. Zhao Run listened, intrigued despite himself. You didn't just attack us, Hale continued. You humiliated us. You crushed our cities, burned our history, wiped out entire families like they were nothing. And we learned something real important from that. Zhao Run raised a brow ridge. And what is that? Hale's smirk returned, just a hint of something dark curling at the edges. That we don't fight fair. At that precise moment, a shudder ran through the ship. It was barely perceptible, just a small vibration beneath their feet, but it was enough. Zhao Run's 6 eyes narrowed. His head tilted slightly, the first sliver of unease creeping into his expression. Hale exhaled, relaxing slightly in his chair. Right on time. The second tremor was stronger. The lights flickered. A strange, high-pitched screeching sound echoed through the corridors, the unmistakable wail of systems failing. Zhao Run rose to his feet, towering over the human. What have you done? Hale shrugged. I told you. We don't fight fair. The virus was already inside the Judgment S systems, spreading like wildfire through the Vorthan network. Every ship connected to their command structure was now compromised, their targeting systems scrambled, shields fluctuating, weapons refusing to fire. The Vorthan prided themselves on efficiency, on perfect coordination. But they had never accounted for chaos. Zhao Run turned sharply as a transmission crackled to life in his ear. Supreme Commander, our systems are... The voice cut out in static. More tremors. Distant explosions. The ship's emergency sirens blared. Zhao Run's jaw tightened. He turned back to Hale, his posture rigid with fury. You planned this. Hale grinned. I know, right? Not bad for a bunch of primitives. The chamber door burst open, VA Corps storming inside, weapon drawn. Sir, we are under attack. The humans... He hesitated, staring at Hale with sudden realization. It was a trap. Hale clapped his hands together. Ding, ding, ding. Give the Bugman a prize. VA Corps lunged forward, but Zhao Run raised a clawed hand, stopping him. He locked eyes with Hale, his expression no longer one of amusement. This will not end the war, Zhao Run said. No, Hale admitted, but it's a hell of a start. The ship lurched violently. Outside the viewport, the Vorthan fleet was in disarray, their once formidable warships colliding with one another, their formations broken. And amidst the chaos, human ships, stolen Vorthan crafts, retrofitted with Earth's own brutality, struck back. Zhao Run exhaled slowly. This was not the simple extermination he had envisioned. This was something else, something dangerous. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. Hale stood, rolling his shoulders. Now, he said, glancing at Viver, I'd love to stick around and chat, but I have an empire to dismantle. The explosion that tore through the chamber was small, controlled, just enough to rupture the bindings on Hale's wrists and send the room into a momentary haze of smoke. When the air cleared, the human was gone. Zhao Run stood in the wreckage, his jaw clenched. They had underestimated the humans, and now they would pay for it. Zhao Run moved with calculated precision through the corridors of the Judgment, his 6 eyes scanning every detail as the warship trembled beneath him. Smoke curled through the air, acrid and stifling, the scent of burning circuitry tainting the recycled oxygen. The once pristine vessel of the Vorthan Dominion was now a battlefield, its corridors echoing with the sharp reports of energy weapons and the distant screams of soldiers caught in the crossfire. It was chaos, and Zalruin despised chaos. The humans had done this. He had spent cycles studying lesser species, breaking them, bending them to the will of the Dominion. None had ever resisted so stubbornly, so irrationally. It was not strategy or superior firepower that had undone them. It was madness. A willingness to fight long past the point of reason, to throw everything into the abyss rather than accept defeat. The Vorthan had thought themselves unbreakable. Now, their flagship was dying beneath them. A transmission flickered in his ear. "Supreme Commander, we have sustained heavy damage across all decks. Primary weapons are offline. Shields are fluctuating. We have lost contact with the fleet." The voice broke into static before cutting out completely. Zalruin exhaled slowly, his claws tightening. He turned to VA Core, who stood rigid at his side, mandibles twitching with barely contained rage. "The virus is crippling our systems," VA Core growled. "Our targeting matrices are compromised, our command relays severed. We cannot fight like this." Zalruin's expression was unreadable. "Then we adapt." A violent tremor rocked the ship, sending sparks raining from the ceiling. Emergency sirens howled through the corridors, a cacophony of warnings that signaled the unthinkable. The Judgment, the Dominion's symbol of invincibility, was losing. He would not allow it. "Seal off the lower decks," Zalruin ordered. "Contain the infection. If we cannot purge it, we will cut it from the ship entirely." VA Core hesitated. "But Supreme Commander, that will—" "I do not require your concerns," Zalruin snapped, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Obey." VA Core stiffened, then bowed his head. "Yes, Supreme Commander." Zalruin turned away, his mind racing. The humans had crippled their fleet, but they had not won. Not yet. There was still one undeniable truth. The Dominion did not surrender. He activated his personal command interface, the holographic display flickering erratically. The virus was still spreading, tendrils of corrupted code latching onto every system, devouring their control. But there was one function still operational, one final contingency. His clawed fingers moved swiftly, bypassing security protocols, initiating the purge sequence. Deep within the Judgment, the core of the warship thrummed with energy as the ship prepared for self-destruction. A final act of defiance. If the humans thought they had secured victory, they would soon learn the price of their arrogance. But something was wrong. The interface flickered, the command stalling. Lines of foreign code snaked across the screen, rewriting his instructions before his very eyes. The virus. No, not just the virus. The humans. They were still inside his ship, deeper than he had realized. They weren't just shutting down his systems. They were hijacking them. And then a voice. "Nice try." Marcus Hale's voice echoed through the fractured comms. "But we're not done yet." Zalruin's head snapped up, fury igniting in his chest. "You." The human's voice was steady, controlled. "You know, for a species that thinks it's so advanced, you really don't understand us at all." Zalruin clenched his jaw. "Enlighten me." A pause. Then Hale spoke, quieter this time, but no less lethal. "We don't just fight to survive. We fight to win." Across the Judgment, systems that had once belonged to the Vorthan now turned against them. Weapons recalibrated, targeting their own forces. Security locks disengaged, allowing human strike teams to sweep through the corridors like phantoms. The Dominion's mighty warship was no longer theirs. It belonged to the enemy. The realization hit Zalruin like a physical blow. His empire, his people, this was not supposed to happen. Humanity was supposed to fall, to kneel beneath the might of the Dominion. But now, as the great flagship trembled, as his fleet burned in the black void of space, the truth was undeniable. The Vorthan had not broken humanity. They had only reminded them of what they were capable of, and humanity had responded with fire. A cold certainty settled within him. If he was to die, he would not do so as a failure. He would not allow the Dominion's legacy to end in disgrace. He moved swiftly, his towering frame gliding through the corridors as alarms screamed around him. His guards flanked him, their weapons raised, their resolve unshaken even as their world collapsed. They had served him for cycles, and they would follow him to the end. But before he could reach the escape deck, a figure stepped into his path. Marcus Hale stood alone, a stolen Vorthan rifle in his hands, its barrel leveled directly at Zalrun's chest. The two locked eyes. "This is over," Hale said. Zalrun straightened. "You presume victory." Hale didn't smile, didn't taunt. He simply shook his head. "No, I just know when something's already dead." For the first time in his long life, Zalrun felt something foreign coil in his chest. A strange, unfamiliar weight. Not fear. Finality. He had underestimated them. Not just their ability to fight, but their refusal to die on anyone's terms but their own. The Dominion had won every war before this one, but it had never faced an enemy like humanity, and it never would again. He took a slow breath, straightened his posture. "If this is my end," Zalrun said, voice steady, "then know that I do not regret it." Hale watched him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he pulled the trigger. A single shot. The supreme commander of the Vorthan Dominion fell. The war did not end that day. Battles still raged across the stars, echoes of conflict rippling through the void. But the tide had turned. The unbreakable fleet of the Dominion had been shattered, its flagship taken, its leader slain. And in the ruins of what was once an invincible empire, humanity stood tall. They had been underestimated, dismissed, forgotten. But now, the galaxy would remember.